Welcome to Bitcoin Live on Sunday evening in Holland, that is. With us is the CEO and founder, Daniel Stevens of Deep3 Labs, a really interesting project. And welcome to the show, Daniel.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
Well, the pleasure is all ours, and we're going to just dive right into it. You got sort of like 15 years of experience as a data scientist and economist. I think you have a background in MIT, Fidelity, Apple, Google. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in Web3 and what made you found Deep3 Labs?
Yeah, definitely. So my background, as you pointed out, has been in data science. I've worked in big tech companies you've heard of, like Google, tiny ones you've never heard of. Worked in academia. I had the pleasure of working with a really smart group of neuroscience researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, which was a really cool job. I actually found my way into crypto through mining, which I know is the way a lot of folks get into this. As you pointed out, my background is in economics. So the game theory of consensus and protocol level development was just super interesting to me. So in 2015, I started building some mining rigs in my buddy's garage. A few years later, that gentleman was posed a question by his now wife and mother of his kids that it was either me or the mining rigs, and he chose wisely. I just never really looked back. I've been going deeper and deeper into crypto ever since I started doing that stuff back in 2015.
Wow, that is impressive. Jan, you asked the next question.
Check one. There's one thing, a little technical thing. Can you expand a little bit about the AI models and what value it brings?
Yeah, so at Deep3, what we do primarily is train machine learning and artificial intelligence models on blockchain data. And that's really what makes our work unique. There's tons of crypto startups out there, crypto AI startups out there, and very, very few of them are actually training their models using the blockchain. And that is what sets us apart. And the reason that's important is because if you think about how machine learning has become valuable on the internet today, it's primarily around training the training on user data, right? So when you go on Google and you search for something, they're using billions of records of past user searches to predict what you're interested in. And when they serve you a particular ad, it's the same thing. They're predicting what you're going to buy, what you're going to click on. Facebook, when you log in, you see a feed that's unique to you because they're predicting what you're going to be engaged in. And that kind of personalized user experience is really what created the Web 2 that we know today. If we're going to ever accomplish our goal of, bringing the next billion people on chain in Web 3, we need to be able to develop those same kinds of dynamic, personalized user experiences. And the way that's done is by training machine learning models on user data. And in Web 3, that user data is what's locked up in the chain itself. When a trader goes on Uniswap and then later goes and buys an NFT on OpenSea and then goes and plays a game, what they're doing is they're leaving this trail of breadcrumbs out there on the blockchain. And those breadcrumbs are really just user interactions. They tell us what that particular wallet is interested in, what their preferences are. And data scientists like us can use that to create machine learning models that predicts all kinds of different things. So we can predict how long people hold token investments. We can predict if they're going to try, a new platform. They're going to, liquid stake tomorrow or something. We can predict if they're going to enjoy one blockchain game over another blockchain game. And so if you kind of tie that all back to, what we know about how ML shaped Web 2, these will be very vital tools in creating those same kinds of personalized dynamic user experiences that brought billions online, back in the 2010s and earlier. The thing that we talk about a lot is you overlook that a platform like Facebook managed to attract 17-year-olds and 70-year-olds to the same exact platform. And the main, trick up their sleeve, how they did that, is by using these really powerful machine learning models to tailor each user's experience to exactly what they're looking for, what they'll find engaging. So everything that we do at Deep3 Labs is primarily geared towards solving those same problems. We want to see a blockchain backed internet, a Web 3.0, where when you connect your wallet to an app, you get an experience that's been tailored for you. Because we just believe that mainstream internet users, they become accustomed to that kind of UX. And we have a long way to go on Web3 before we can actually deliver that kind of UX. And there's many other problems to solve, of course. Wallet abstraction is definitely a big one. But our contribution to that mission is very much through building machine learning models that are trained on blockchain data, so that we can predict what users will be interested in, what they'll engage with, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
And what does sort of restoring user agency really mean to you in a world driven by algorithms and profit incentives?
I'm really glad you brought that up. It's probably the most overlooked aspect of commercial AI ML out there. We often talk about stories like the Frances Haugen whistleblower incident from several years back. For those that aren't aware, there was this developer who worked inside Instagram at the time, I believe, and she came into Congress and shared that the executives at Meta knew how predatory, how negative the algorithms in their application were for young minds, and particularly the minds of young women, and yet they deployed those algorithms anyways. And we believe that when you start scaling that problem up, right, when it's not just images on a web app or on a smartphone app, when it's medical devices, when it's things that are dealing with sensitive financial data, even bigger things, you start getting into defense and other real life critical issues. Regular people, right, you and me, not just executives at the biggest companies, we need to have influence, if not control, over how these AI models are being built and how they're deployed. And that's just not the case right now. Like we argue all the time that there's probably fewer than 500 human beings on planet Earth, this rock full of 8 billion people, better part of half or 2/3 of which are connected to the internet, that are controlling how AI is shaping our everyday lives. And that's really wild when you think about it. Fewer than 500 people really making those decisions. Excuse me. And so what we're doing at Deep3 with decentralized technology, the distributed ledger, is developing systems so that regular people can actually have control and influence over those AI models. So more specifically, when we train a model, we aren't actually the ones that are pushing that out into an API for somebody to consume. We've built processes that are listening for passing governance votes and then automatically push those models out live. So we're still very early days in what we've built, but the end game is that every single model that's built by Deep3 or built on a Deep3 platform is ultimately governed by the same users that are connecting to that app. So say Uniswap integrates one of our recommendation engines. If users believe that model isn't performing the way that they think it should be, all they have to do is participate in decentralized governance. And now they instantly have more agency in how those AI models are affecting their everyday life. Again, with something like swapping tokens, probably not a big deal. But I think we all know that AI is going to have a much bigger role in our lives.
Yeah.
And so we believe that a lot of this technology that we're building on the blockchain now is going to become more and more important over time as AI takes on a bigger and bigger role in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's a nice bridge to my next question, because many say AI and blockchain are sort of natural complements, but how do you define that synergy sort of concretely?
Yes, yeah, they are perfect complements, but I think in sort of one direction is not really being explored fully. So you've got a lot of companies out there that are finding ways so that the blockchain can help AI. right? You've got distributed compute networks. You've got even the things that Deep3 is doing with decentralized governance. What you don't have as many of is how can AI help the blockchain, and particularly around user experience. And that's what we were talking about before, where we want to create the types of tools that created all the success in Web 2, that made these dominant companies on Web 2. We want to make those available to individual developers. And so, there are a ton of natural synergies in decentralization, where things like, everyone's GPU that's just sitting there latent on their computer can now be hooked up into a decentralized compute network and made available to AI engineers. And we think that's all great. And there's a ton of work already happening in that direction. But what we want to focus a lot more on is, how can AI help the blockchain, and particularly around user experience? The availability of data on Web3 is truly unprecedented. In Web 2, Google knows what people are doing on Google's platform, and Facebook knows what people are doing on Facebook's platform. But once users go beyond those platforms, their perspective becomes a lot more limited. And that means that their ability to generate these really powerful, comprehensive predictions about user behavior, it starts to degrade, the further away from their platform that you get. On Web3, that's not the case. The blockchain is open, and it's comprehensive. And so we believe that AI can really generate a profoundly new type of dynamic, personalized user experience, and that can bring billions of users onto Web3.
Yeah, if we are talking about that, is it? Can you explain what Hoku is and how it fits into this story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to understand Hoku is through analogy. What we're trying to do is take the recommendation engines that are behind platforms like TikTok or Netflix or YouTube or Spotify, right? These algorithms that look at your past user history, and then they try to say, okay, this is the kind of video that this person wants to watch. This is the kind of song that they want to listen to. We want to apply that to token trading because in many ways it's the same problem, right? There's millions of videos on YouTube. There's thousands of new tokens being created every day on the blockchain. And so traders have this really challenging problem of staying on top of everything that's happening, all the new tokens that are being launched. So Hoku is an attempt at taking those kind of recommendation engines that are really just discovery aids. They make it easier for you to find the things that you're interested in a large sea of content, a large sea of options, and apply that to token trading. So when you connect your wallet to Hoku, you get personalized token recommendations based off of your past trading history. And then we have a series of machine learning models that's actually predicting short-term price movements. So,
Okay.
the end game of Hoku is that if you have 10 minutes to log in to, your favorite, Web3 swap engine and make a trade, you would log into Hoku and say, okay, right now in the market, based on my trading preferences, based on the things that I like to trade, what should I buy right now or what should I sell right now? That's what Hoku will present you. And so far, our recommendation algorithm has proved extremely accurate. And I don't mean on small test samples. Like we've run several week samples of data, and we've gotten above 90% accuracy on those recommendations.
That's crazy.
That's a very powerful tool.
It is. It is crazy, and I think a lot of people go, "Wait a second, like red flag. How can you get that high of recommendation accuracy in predicting markets?" And the thing that we always try to explain is we're not predicting markets; we're predicting market participants. What Hoku does, where it gets its power is we're looking at literally every single active trader on the blockchain, and we're applying very high powered machine learning to that level of data. And so the Hoku engine at its core, it's not predicting a token price. What it's predicting, will more users buy this token? So, at the end of the day, if we see a small group of traders buy a token, we fire up a bunch of machine learning models that are asking, will more users start buying those tokens? And that's the kind of kernel that starts every one of our recommendations. So we achieve that high accuracy because what we're doing is we're really predicting the user behavior in the market. We're not really predicting the market itself.
Yeah, and I guess in line with that, how do you balance user privacy with algorithmic accuracy? And in the same line of questioning, how do you train your models without falling into the same sort of exploitative data practices that Web 2 has been criticized for?
Yeah, so two answers to that. Number one, our decentralized token protocol, we've talked about the governance benefits to it. The other benefit is it enables value sharing. So when you stake your Deep3 governance token, you can vote on how these AI models are being developed. But more importantly, you're earning a share of the value that the protocol generates. So privacy is definitely always a problem, and it's something that every user should demand. But I actually believe that in many cases, and I'll speak for myself here, I'm not as concerned about privacy in this context as I am like financial equity, right? It's not fair that Google generates these products that for them lead to billions and billions of dollars in profit, and I get free navigation to the grocery store and an email account. Like, that's not fair. Maybe it was 15 years ago when they were a smaller company and these things were, not as pervasive in society. But at this point, the lack of parity has gotten so far out of balance that I think when a lot of people complain about privacy concerns, really, what's behind that is this sort of, unconscious feeling that there's something unfair in this system, and I should be paid for this good that I'm creating. It's like being a car manufacturer and not having to pay for steel and plastic at the end of the day. So in our protocol, when you stake our token, you are passively earning a share of the value that gets created in the Deep3 ecosystem. So that kind of addresses the monetization, part of this. Yeah. And I know that's to an extent sidesteps the question of privacy. Privacy is not entirely solved by that. And there's a whole constellation of research that's happening alongside of what we're doing at Deep3 that more directly addresses privacy concerns. And we are always staying on top of that so that when these kinds of systems become ready for real commercial use, they can be incorporated into our stack. So I'm talking about things like zero knowledge proofs. Fully homomorphic encryption is a big one. That is there's still a lot of work to do in that realm. But that is in many ways sort of a holy grail in this problem space, because we can still train very, very powerful machine learning models, and they can still be deployed by businesses and by consumers on the other end. But we as researchers, as data scientists, we can't actually understand any of the data that's going into those models. So there are many other pathways that over time will converge to a place where Deep3 and companies like us can develop these really powerful, really lucrative products for online, user experience improvement and just general business operation optimization, and balance, inequities around the financial models, that you see out there in Web 2. And obviously, address these very real privacy concerns.
Yeah, and we are sort of very big believers in decentralization, but is true decentralization even possible in AI ecosystems, especially with compute and data are so centralized?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge problem, and it's going to take consumers also, really demanding that those kind of companies are rewarded more than the centralized ones. The vote with your feet premise is probably never more important than in this space. If each of us start adopting the more kind of decentralized less, not the incumbent players, right? If we start patronizing those businesses more, you're going to help rebalance this system, because today, as we talked about at the start, right, there's a very, very small number of people that are controlling and benefiting from this technology that's going to be probably one of the most important technologies over the next several decades in shaping our future. So, no one person, no one company can really solve that. It takes every single person on the internet making choices to support the kinds of businesses that are building in their own image, right, that are putting the little guy first, that are making decisions that aren't really just what's the best thing for my shareholders, what's the best thing for my board, but what's the best thing for my users, and even more broadly, just people out there on planet Earth. It doesn't have to just be your users that you're thinking about.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know you have also sort of a background or an interest in neocolonialism and literary criticism. So my next question is sort of like, based on that, do you think we're sort of approaching a new kind of digital neocolonialism with AI models dominated by a few countries or companies?
I mean, first of all, I gotta say, like, you guys are awesome. You dug deep in the background. I don't know that I've had anyone ask me about some of those papers I wrote like a good 15 years ago.
Cum laude, I think you finished, right?
What's that?
You finished like cum laude, like.
Oh, I was a huge nerd in college. I spent so much time in the library. I mean, we could go back real deep into some of those stories, but I barely graduated high school. I was a total just burnout. Didn't really care about school. Literally barely graduated high school. And then when I went to college, I finally got interested in some of these particular studies. One of them was neocolonialism in literature. And that really kind of got my fire started. And I do think it has some very, very important parallels in today's digital world. So for those that aren't super nerds like me, or perhaps like you guys, if you bring this up,
we are nerds too.
This is what we're talking about, is the ability for a dominant society or culture to really export not just products, but their ideas, their culture, their way of thinking. And that can be incredibly powerful, and it can also be incredibly detrimental, depending on what those actual ideas are. And when you actually start approaching this from the lens of AI, this gets magnified in some really important ways. So many people may know this, but when an AI model is being built, all it really is this incredibly powerful, multi-dimensional mirror that has been stood up, and it's reflecting the entire history of human creation, right? So a language model, the way it's built is it's ingesting every single character and word and sentence and paragraph and book that has ever been created. So in many ways, all it is an encapsulation of everything that we have created as mankind and penned to paper, right? So what that means is it's really just parroting back what we already have written or said or thought about. And so when you go and start talking about that getting packaged up into a model, into an AI model, and then sent to a completely different culture, a completely different part of the world, you now have this really subtle way of shaping that receiving culture that they're probably not even going to realize is happening. Right? It's one thing when you open up a textbook, say you're a teacher in Bangladesh or something. If you open up a textbook and it's written by an American, there's some transparency there. Like, okay, yeah, clearly, like this has some, this is going to have some context. This is going to have some bias that comes from a Western culture like America. When you talk to an AI model, that same thing is true if that model has been predominantly trained on American content or culture. But it's not nearly as obvious, not nearly as transparent. And when you go and start peeling the onion even further and say, okay, well, what if we start looking at racial bias, right? We already know that there's some really powerful and surprising ways that racial bias ends up in data-driven medical care and medicine. And so if you now go and take models and products that have been trained on, primarily Anglo-Saxon, patients, and you go and now apply those in an environment where it's a completely different, racial makeup, you're having these really hidden and very significant ways that those kinds of biases can end up in that culture. And so I think that, first of all, like, that's already happening.
Yeah.
We're not talking future. This kind of, digital neo-colonialism, it is already happening. It's been happening for probably the better part of 20 years. I don't think many people are talking about it. I don't think many people are really trying to solve the problem per se, but this is happening, and AI is going to dial that intensity up to 11, because, again, all an artificial intelligence model is it's a distillation of the human behaviors, the human language, whatever that kind of behavior that the model is intended to replicate. All it's doing is it's literally creating a mirror of everything it learned from the people that it learned those things from.
Yeah.
And I guess sort of that also ties into your interest in game theory, right? So how has game theory shaped your thinking about incentive design, governance, and product strategy? Because I think that ties into, right?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, the basics of game theory are already built into the blockchain at a very fundamental level. So I would argue that we're not doing anything terribly novel when it comes to thinking about game theory and incentives, because a lot of that's been solved at the protocol level. But just, as examples, the end state of our platform is that anyone can train a machine learning model, and then anyone else can come along and pick it up and use it in their app, so that you create an environment where somebody can just have a really great idea for an app, and the thing that they're missing to compete is always that virtuous cycle of AI and improved UX. And what I mean by that is, when you create like a recommendation engine, you're creating better UX because that AI is predicting what your users want to see, what they want to click, etc. That attracts more users. Then when more users come to your platform, your AI gets better, and so on and so forth, right? So what that does is it creates a competitive environment where the incumbents have a huge advantage. And so at Deep3, what we want to do is make it so that anyone can go and build those models. You don't need to hire, a dozen expensive machine learning engineers and pay for a bunch of server space. Our protocol will allow you to come and build that model, include it in your app, and now you've just leveled up in your competitiveness. But there's a problem in that, right? You don't know who built that model now. It's not your employee. So there's an incentive problem to solve here. But blockchain gives you a variety of really simple tools to make that happen. So when you go and you train a model on our platform, you actually collateralize that model. So you put a bunch of tokens behind that model, and that is a way that you can signal to the end users that, yes, you can trust this. Because if later on our governance community comes along and says, hey, that model it didn't do what it said it was supposed to do, or it had this kind of predatory effect that no one knew about, or it just generally was not advertised accurately on the platform, they can vote to delist that platform, that model, and that user who posted the collateral will lose that collateral, and it can go to indemnifying anyone that feels like they were harmed. So when it comes to game theory, there is so much really important research that's happening at the field. But for Deep3, we get to really rely on just some very basic premises of that discipline to make sure that things like two-sided marketplaces, where the good itself that's being exchanged is effectively a black box. There's no way you can really know, is this ML model good? Is it is it performant, right? You can't really know those things ahead of time. Game theory becomes a really powerful tool to solving for that kind of problem.
You've already sort of created a lot of products, right? We already mentioned Hoku, but you also have Hodl C1, Stake, Sage C, Deep Shield. I like Deep Shield, by the way. Cluster One. Can you tell us a little bit about these different products that Deep3 Labs created and what they're about?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, each one of those products is really predicting a wallet behavior. So HODL C1 is predicting, will this wallet, will this address hold its next token investment for a long period of time, right? Are they the diamond-handed hodlers, or are they the paper-handed, sellers, right? The Deep Shield models are predicting bad wallet behaviors. So Deep Shield's FR, that's predicting if an address is going to commit a front-running attack, a sandwich attack. We have the Stake Sage family of models that's specifically built for liquid staking platforms in the DeFi vertical. And so there we're predicting, is this address likely to be a high lifetime value customer? Are they going to stake 100 ETH, or are they going to stake 1 ETH? We have other models that are predicting conversion rates. So, for anyone that's spent any time in kind of Web 2 performance marketing, a lot of this stuff is going to sound familiar, because it is. What we're doing here is we're really focusing on the user behaviors that businesses tend to care about when they're trying to think about their customers, when they're thinking about their performance marketing, their precision or targeted marketing. That kind of stuff is fairly absent on Web3 today. And so these models are really meant to give developers and businesses a higher degree of intelligence about the addresses that are connecting to their DApp or that are in their marketing targeting campaigns. Because, as I said, many times before, for Web3 to really grow up and compete with Web 2 and to onboard the next billion users, we need to give not only mainstream users the kinds of tools that they've become accustomed to on the modern internet. We have to do the same thing for business operators. On Web 2, you have incredibly high resolution, precision marketing intelligence on platforms like Google Ads. That kind of stuff isn't yet there in Web 3. But what we're doing is we're demonstrating that all the data that we need to build similar tools, it's locked up there in the blockchain. And it's really not that difficult to build once you spend the time and resources to build the fundamental data layers that Deep3 has. What I mean by that is, we've spent months and months and months building out architecture that takes data out of nodes and restructures it into a format that a machine learning model can understand. Once you get to that point, the rest of the model development process is actually relatively fast. You can spin up models that target different types of problems or different behaviors relatively quickly. And that's how we plan to get to a place where anyone can just come onto our platform with a particular behavior they want to predict or model, with a few keystrokes explaining what that desire is. Now all of a sudden you have a fully trained and production ready machine learning model that you can go and deploy in your business.
Can you tell us how Andromeda digital objects sort of figure into this? Is that a part of Cosmos, or how does, because I think it's also
So Andromeda is one of our partners. They do build primarily in the Cosmos ecosystem. There's not current development activity happening on this, but there's a really exciting future potential where they're operating system objects, right? So there's little building blocks of code that you can stack up to build all kinds of different Web3 apps, can all become intelligent. They can all have AI embedded inside them so that when they're performing whatever operation that they're designed to perform, they can do it intelligently. So just really basic example that we've talked about in the past between Andromeda and Deep3, they have a crowdfunding module. So it's like an ICO module. And one of the products that we've built, Hodl C1, is applicable here. So you can use a model that predicts, will this person hold their next token investment for a long period of time, with a crowd create dynamic pricing. So now when a startup uses an Andromeda development object to build their crowdfunding their app, they can now have a pricing structure where long-term holders are automatically incentivized with better terms, and the short-term holders are disincentivized with not as favorable terms. And what they get at the end of the day now is a better initial, secondary market. They'll have more early investors that are the coveted long-term holders, and fewer short-term holders. And now if you take those kind of examples and you multiply them out into all of the other things that an operating system handles, having the capability for each of those little functions to be smart, to be intelligent, is really powerful. And you don't really even need to trust us, right, for that. Apple's already doing it in all of their latest operating system releases. AI is now being implemented at a lower and lower level in the computer architecture system.
Wow. Yeah, but it is a very powerful tool. I think, especially if you look in the crypto space, you see so many token launches and sometimes great ideas, but because it's so speculative, many of those projects die. Sometimes even within a year or maybe in 2 or 3 years. And if you can enhance this data and your tool, then I think you get less tokens but better projects, and that would be nice in the space.
Yep, definitely.
Definitely.
Wow. Yeah, I had one more question. It relates a little bit to Cosmos, but are there any other big, how do you say it, projects that you are going to work with in the space, or can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so one of our other partnerships is with a company called TrueBit. They've been around for quite some time. Their founder is an Ethereum OG. He's been in the space a very, very long time. And what they're focused on is verifiable compute. And so when you think about AI and the need for verifiable compute, I think the synergies there are fairly obvious. If it's one thing when an AI model is just recommending a token swap to you, it's quite another if an AI model is going to make a decision in your healthcare or in your, kind of financial lives, whatever. We need to be able to trust the computations in these models. And there are literally trillions of them happening. I don't think the average person realizes the extent of the mathematics that's happening when you just go and say hi in ChatGPT. It's very easy to, as a developer, to build systems where the computations in there are not exactly as you think they are when it's such a black box like that. And so we partner with the team at TrueBit because we believe that the future of AI, if it's going to really hit the scale of importance and work in critical elements and aspects of our lives, there's going to need to be a lot of transparency around the computation. And so that's definitely one of our most important partnerships. We're at a place right now where I don't actually believe that in the Web3 AI vertical, there is not a ton of demand for that transparent compute. I think right now we're at an earlier stage in the maturity life cycle when it comes to adoption of AI on Web3. So, our current products don't necessarily operate on the TrueBit protocol. We want to make sure that we're starting to understand their protocol today, and more importantly, we're helping them learn how to apply that kind of verifiable compute to the complex calculations that go into machine learning, so that when several years or however long it takes down the line, these models require that degree of transparency and that verifiable compute. We're already positioned as one of the leaders in the market and offering truly trustless compute around AI model delivery and AI model usage. So I'd say TrueBit's definitely one of our most important partners out there. And we've worked with them, I think, at this point for the better part of a year. a lot of their progress around cracking open the Python libraries that are really popular in the ML space and rebuilding them in that verifiable, construct that they have. We've been a leader in helping them develop those kind of capabilities.
That sort of ties into my sort of next question. Because as AI becomes more agentic and financialized, how do we ensure the ethical guardrails without slowing down innovation?
I don't think there's a way that you can truly do it without slowing down innovation, right? It's a fundamental, engineering triad: better, faster, cheaper, pick two. Um, there's not magic tricks there, but I do think there's ways that it can be balanced appropriately. When we think about agents making decisions for us, um, there are already a lot of solutions in, for example, like adversarial AI, where you use one agent to perform your desired outcome, but then you task another agent with, effectively policing that initial agent. So those are systems that are already available today. They're not incredibly complicated to set up. And there's a ton of research that's already happened. So I think you have, on one end of the spectrum, very low hanging fruit in creating systems where AI can be, you can put in those kind of guardrails. But then I think you have the entire other end of the spectrum, where we don't have those answers. And that's why, you have companies out there like Safe Superintelligence that are able to raise, literally hundreds of millions of dollars in a matter of a few weeks to solve that problem, because people know it's literally that important. So I'm not going to stand here today and say like, oh yeah, we know the answers to that. No one in the industry does. Even the smartest minds in this industry right now, they don't know exactly how we're going to build systems that will be on the other side of the singularity and
Yeah.
yet still be trustworthy to, the inferior human minds that created them. But the one thing I can say is we are going to live in some very exciting times. I'm not one of the people that believes that, the whole Terminator scenario is like, going to happen in our lifetimes. But I do think that we are going to see some really wild uses of AI in our lives. And the one thing that has been true since we picked up a rock and hit something with it and called it a hammer, right? Every tool is dual use.
Yeah.
It's the operator, and that is what makes the difference between something being good and something being bad. Literally every single tool ever created is dual use. If you can literally take the hammer, right? You can pound nails with it, or you can pound someone's head with it. It's still a hammer, and the hammer isn't inherently good or bad. The same thing can be said about AI. So I think the emphasis is on us as developers and as users to make sure that when we pick these tools up, we are doing good, or at least attempting to do good with them, because we are going to come to a place very soon where when you hit a button to say start, you're hitting off this row of dominoes where you don't know exactly where it's going to end up. And so your intent when you hit that start button is going to matter a lot. And there are no, real sort of magic tricks to making sure that the outcome is going to be safe.
Well, I think you sort of already hinted at it. But my next question is, what keeps you up at night, technically, ethically, or existentially? I think you're optimistic, but is there
I
something that
am.
you worry about?
Yeah, no, I am very optimistic. I think if I had to say what keeps me up at night when it comes to the AI vertical, um, it really it ends up being a lot of that parity stuff. We If you look at the market today, we are not seeing a a proliferation of really new entrants to this space. The Googles and the Microsofts of the world are still really in the driver's seat. Um, and when it comes to AI, and we talked about this whole virtuous cycle of data science, that becomes even more important. So I would really like to see, and what keeps me up at night is, I would like to see a lot more startups come up with these really novel solutions that can start challenging the big players, because that is what benefits everyone. When a small number of companies get more and more powerful, it's not even just businesses they compete with that suffer. It's the consumers, it's the users that suffer. And when you have companies like Google who are and Microsoft who have their tentacles in just about everything, the degree to which there can be these hidden costs is really unfathomable. And AI is starting to shape up in a way where we're not seeing a lot of new entrants. And frankly, even a lot of these startups that are seeing early success because they've wrapped a foundational model, like a chat GPT model, in a specific product solution layer. It's only a matter of time until the underlying foundational model becomes better at solving that bespoke problem. And so that startup now gets wiped off the map. So I would say, like, I don't fear the singularity. I don't fear that, like, AIs are going to all of a sudden, we're going to live in the matrix and we're just going to be these, like, meat sacks that are giving energy to computers. I don't fear that stuff. I fear that we're going to continue to go down a path where there are really just a small number of hidden players in our society that have an outsized influence over our lives, and the average person just doesn't know it's happening and doesn't realize what the opportunity cost of that is.
I got one more question, and then maybe you still have one. But what books, thinkers, or frameworks have most influenced how you think about intelligent systems and decentralization?
So when it comes to, it's kind of interesting because I don't know that it actually has a direct line to it, but I am super interested in the field of behavioral economics. So Danny Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow is one of my favorite books.
It's big.
What's that?
It's a big book.
It is a big book.
It's a big book.
It is a surprisingly light and fun read for that kind of field that it talks about.
But also dense, like in the matter.
Incredibly dense. But the thing that I love most about it is it's like one of those light bulb moments when you understand how your brain works in the kind of system 1, system 2, autopilot mode stuff. You start seeing it everywhere, it just all throughout your life. And so I don't know that there's a direct line to data science or intelligent systems that I could draw for you here. But I think there's a direct line to your everyday life and to being a leader on a team, to being a good partner to your spouse. Right? We spend a lot of time in that system 1 autopilot mode, and the more that we can get out of that mode, the better. And understanding how it works, understanding that it affects even the most highly trained fighter pilots in the world, is really powerful. And so again, like it doesn't have a direct line. I think I'm sidestepping your question a little bit here, but I think it's more broadly applicable to the audience. And if anyone hasn't read Thinking Fast and Slow by Danny Kahneman, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite books. The other one that I would bring up is Taleb's Sapiens. Again, not a direct line to data science in any way, but I think it is powerful in terms of where are we going as a culture, as a society, and how can how will AI play a role in that?
And I think, just tying into what you just said, the automatic thinking can be very powerful, right? Because you can do incredible things by like firefighters or police officers, they run into a burning building and save people. But do you also think like that AI could actually sort of reinforce the automatic thinking in a sort of negative way?
Yes, it is already. There's already so many studies out there that are kind of playing it out, right? Like, and I'm absolutely guilty of this. But when spell check came out, like I stopped learning how to spell. I can't spell anything, right? Google navigation came out. Like I find myself getting lost going places that I've been to 100 times. And now you go and look at the kinds of things that ChatGPT can do for you today. If we let those skills atrophy, yeah, I mean, maybe we are heading a little bit towards that, really scary kind of matrixy life, but it's not because the machines did it. It's because we gave up our agency just by
Too much
letting
comfort.
those kind of skills atrophy. Yeah. So I hadn't thought about that, but that is a really interesting connection to the thinking fast and slow. AI is definitely going to be a powerful weight on one side of that scale.
Yeah, we should never outsource our critical thinking. That would be devastating, I think. I want to really thank you for this amazing interview, and we wish you all the best with Deep3 Labs and all the research and development that you guys are doing there. And
you're always welcome back on the show. We would love to have you on in the near future and explain more about your awesome company and what you're
love to. Yeah, I'd love to, gentlemen. This has been a lot of fun. As I said, I haven't been asked about those old papers in so long. I'm so jazzed up about that. Maybe one of these days I'll send you our game theory applied to Dracula paper, which was super interesting. But again, it has not been dusted off in a good 15 to 20 years, I think.
Cool. That would be a nice read. Yeah.
I guess it's afternoon there, so wish you a really nice afternoon.
Yeah.
And to all the viewers, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, gents. It was a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.